I got
And
you.
I'm an independent now. I can't stand the Democratic Party. these
Really?
days.
What happened? What caused you to change?
They decided to be anti-family and anti-man, and I don't buy into that.
Has it always been like that?
No, it wasn't. Something happened. They kind of got stuck over there in that far left corner someplace, and they forgot about the working people in this country.
When do you think that happened, Judge? Because you ran as a Democrat. Now you're
I
independent.
did. It bothers me. Somewhere in the last 55 years, what's happened is the country is switched over into glorifying what I call dysfunction. And at some point, it's just enough is enough. You've got a thing right now where they're trying to groom children in school. They're trying to install a secular religion as the official religion of the country. People don't have any cause, any purpose anymore, so they want to give them one. But in this one, it says you have no duty, honor, obligation, responsibility, accountability, be what the hell you want to be. Just get your freak on, and there you go. But that's not sufficient to keep people working.
Now, when you say 55 years, is it probably closer to the last 15 years that it's been?
No, it's been working. See, I remember the class at UCLA 1969, and I remember what was being said back then when people said we hate men for one reason or another, and men are the cause of war, so we're going to ruin this thing for the men and get rid of masculinity. And you had this problem with Hollywood when it was going broke in the face of color television, and you switched from 2 movies every Thursday and Sunday every week of the year, and Hollywood was going broke, so they said, let's ramp the fee up from 50 cents to $1.50, and we will have one movie that stays in as long as we can, so let's attract the most people by going to the lowest common denominator, promoting dysfunction, ridiculousness, and meanwhile we can propagandize the country to get rid of manhood. And that basically is what's been happening.
And by the way, these are some of the topics I got that I want to talk about today. One is family, feminism, manhood, politics over the last 50, 60 years, fatherless homes, statistics I have on how many single mothers we used to have in the 40s versus 60s today, LBJ's policies in 1965. Maybe you have some thoughts on that, on what changed when he came out with that. And then we got destruction of the black family, masculinity, LGBTQ, and a few other things. War on drugs, a little bit of that with Nixon. Was that a good thing? Did they choose the right enemy? Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris, Trump, Biden, and maybe a little bit of San Francisco cleaning up the streets this quickly. They got this new technology called G. G shows up. Streets of San Francisco clean up very quickly. So let's go to the direction you were going, okay? The direction you're going on, what's changed? You said, he said 15 years. He said, no, not necessarily. It's more like 50 years, right?
55.
Was it 55 years? Judge, is it more policies? Was it more with a intent? What was the intent? Was the intent because they were trying to please everybody? Was the intent because malicious reasons? Was the intent political? What was the reasons why we've gone through the transitions we've gone through the last 55 years?
Okay, the Johnson administration came up with a safety net. They had good intentions, but people are enterprising, so when they saw the opportunities that were presented, they went for them. And instead of having a safety net that dealt with rescuing people from an untenable situation due to the economics that they found themselves faced with, you got people that said, well, instead of using this to help me with my babies, I use babies to get that so I can help myself. So you have multi-generational situations, and even back in the late 90s, I had people in my courtroom where there were 6 generations where nobody had had a job ever. I had one woman in my courtroom starting in 1994. She had felony drug and theft charges. She was 57. She had a 43-year-old daughter that was in front of me that she had when she was 14. 43-year-old daughter had the same charges. The 43-year-old daughter had a 34-year-old daughter born 1 week shy of her 10th birthday, who was in there. The 34-year-old had a 21-year-old daughter in front of me. The 21-year-old daughter had an 11-year-old daughter
Please don't go lower,
who
Judge.
had the circumstance of being pregnant with her second child.
No way.
With her second child.
Second child.
An 11-year-old, sir?
Yeah. So I got the 21-year-old back in about 14, 15 months. She was 23. Her 11-year-old was 13 with 3 children. The 57-year-old was back in front of me. She was 59, and she had at that point 342 lineal descendants we tracked. And then 2 weeks later, after I got that report, she had 358. And between 1996 and 2000, when I retired, exponential increase, she had more than 3,400, and I had 120 plus of her people in front of me in my courtroom, one way or another. One of her sons had 63 outside children by, I think, 59 different baby mamas, and he was 29.
63, 59, he's 29.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So, I mean, people don't even think about this kind of thing. And then we did another study. We found in the high schools in the Memphis area, there were maybe 35 or 40 core problems where the students were much older than they were supposed to be, and they were creating a negative culture for the whole high school. And we found out that this woman that I had in my courtroom and 4 others, every single one of the 5 that they had in there that we were tracking was an ancestor for every single one of the kids in the high schools that were the core of the problem. So just total dysfunction. And the last we checked was 2008. It turned out these 5 women had almost 250,000 people in West Tennessee that were descended of them, and they were still breathing.
Safe to say that they've never even heard of the word condom, is what you're saying.
Yeah, not only that, but in this group of 3,400 that I wound up dealing with before I retired in 2000, out of this family, we found 2 people that had jobs and graduated from high school, and they were girls who had essentially been kidnapped by their fathers when their mothers went to the penitentiary and got taken to Chicago, which then had a pretty good school system. So those were the only 2 we could find. But see, there's a mass of that out there. So when you talk about the impact of what happened with the Johnson administration, I don't think they intended that, but it happened. Next thing we had in the late 60s, we had the individuals that hated that they weren't men, that's the feminists, the ones that hated men, certain of the lesbians, the one that hated that they weren't strong men, those were the beta boys, some of the gay ones that hated that they weren't normal men, and then you had the ones that stacked on and gave the big ballast that said men were the cause of war, man. We need to have love, man, not war. War is a bad thing, man. We need to get rid of all of this toxic masculinity, like, fool. Where do you think this is going to go? So it went there, and they controlled the communications media, and you get what you get right now, where if you go on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you get this mass censorship where you can't say anything that makes people feel uncomfortable. Oh, my God, he hurt somebody's feelings. Oh, hell, a lot of people need the feelings stomped on, you know. Like, dude, what's wrong with you? Grow stronger.
But Judge, you've been around when you're doing meeting with all these families. What part of the responsibility is mothers? What part of the responsibility is on the father? Because typically the blame goes on the father.
Well, there are no fathers. And see, the thing of it is, these men that just ran off and left the women, these women don't want the men. All they wanted was the babies. And see, you had people like the poetress Nikki Giovanni back in the 60s were going all around the country, and they were lecturing the women, and they were young women, and they were saying, you don't need a father for your children. Just get prego, find one that looks good, smart, athletic. Yeah, that one. And don't even tell him that he's the daddy, because if you bring a man into the picture, they screw up everything. So there was this point where if you had the guy around, there was a problem. And then there was some that did want the guy around, but back when I first started practicing law 50 years ago, one of our number one cases was getting the check cut back on because some dingbat social worker would sit at the end of the block with binoculars, and if there was one or two of the 6 or 7 baby daddies trying to play father, they'd cut the check off. So we had problems with juvenile courts around the country where, Judge, that's not my kid. Well, you feed it long enough, he'll look just like you. So, that was before DNA. And I can remember one thing. It was a cop I was representing, and he got a petition to increase the child support. So when they called the kid's name, I stood up, he stood up. 2 more lawyers stood up and 2 other guys stood up. So this woman was collecting child support from 3 guys for the same kid. So we finagled getting some DNA testing, and none of the 3 were the daddies.
No way.
So, I mean, you have these horror stories going on.
That's some old school Jerry
Sir,
Springer.
was this mostly whites, blacks, Latinos?
Both.
All of the above.
All of the above. The juvenile court started privatizing and acquiring jurisdiction that used to be in superior or circuit courts. So they became dysfunctional circuses, and a lot of them privatized. And what happens is you want to promote dysfunction because that's business downstream.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.